Hey guys, welcome to the Jasmine Ortiz show. This is episode 9. Today we're here again with my lovely co-host, Jordy Polycarp. We're going to be discussing some current events as well as our topic of the week, which is technology and art. This week we have a wonderful guest, Vita Kari. They are a visual and performance artist based in Los Angeles, and I can't wait to share all of their creativity in our conversation with them later. Okay, Jordy. To start out, let's talk about this iPad Pro commercial. So, this commercial is called, quote, Crushed. It came out from Apple about a week or two ago, and there's been a lot of controversy. To sum up this commercial, you see pictured a room full of, or a platform full of different art supplies. There's a piano, there's a trumpet, there's a bunch of cans of paint, there's an old school Pac-Man arcade machine, there's sculptures, there's little wooden figures, there's just a bunch of tangible art supplies. So this is sending a very clear message when the top half of that platform comes down and slowly but surely crushes all of these objects, including what seem like brand new Mac computers and a bunch of other technology as well. Wow, this was a very visceral reaction that we both had to this commercial, not only as artists, but just as like young people in the world. It felt a bit tone deaf, in my opinion.
It was really upsetting. Like,
Yeah.
watching it made me physically recoil.
Yeah.
And it's so sad because I feel like in this age of to be conscious consumers, it's really upsetting to see all of these. They looked like they were in good condition as well. The piano in particular really hurt my feelings.
I know.
And I just think it's upsetting because these are the kinds of resources that could have been donated, And I almost wish they did it with AI or something
I
like that.
know. And it
All of
seems
these
like they
things.
really did it like in real life.
It looks real.
Yeah.
It made me sad.
It
And
made
it
me
makes me
really
sad that
sad too.
our generation is just, especially Gen Alpha. Now that we're teaching kids, I feel like our attention spans are so short, and seeing all of the, I guess the point is they're supposed to say all of these things can now fit in this super skinny slim iPad. But
It's not the same though. And
it's
I
not the
think
same.
it sends a really bad message to young people, especially Gen Alpha or young Gen Z, where you don't need to learn a real skill. You don't need to have a real hobby, a tangible thing that's tactile that can, engage different parts of your brain. You don't need to learn piano. You don't need to paint. You have all that on your iPad. And it's really not the same thing at all. The skills are vastly different that are required to make music or art on technological device versus in analog form with different mediums like charcoal, pencil, with a piano, with a guitar. It's a completely different situation. And I think it's sad that we are becoming, or at least this ad is depicting that we're becoming so technologically reliant that we don't even want or see the value in using or learning about those things anymore.
Hmm.
And that's just a shame. It's really sad.
It genuinely made me upset to see. I don't know what the reaction from it was, or what Apple has said post putting it out, but it just feels very tone deaf for right now.
Yeah.
And they could be using their resources to do other things than destroy these art tools.
Yeah. And I think it points to a greater symbol of waste and wastefulness.
Hmm.
And I think there's validity in sometimes trying or using things to repurpose them for art, right? But this was not art. This was the antithesis of art in a
Hmm.
commercial, basically saying, we don't need those things anymore. They're useless. And that's just not the right way, I think, to be marketing an iPad, because also to me, an iPad is not a tool that I want to use for art. If
Mm.
I'm producing, I'm using a laptop, or even better, I'm using real instruments. If I'm drawing, I'm going to use a pad and paper. A lot of very talented graphic designers use iPads and tools like that to make their art. But a lot of them also started out with a pen and paper, and they also know how to do that. And I think the fact that kids in generations younger than us are not even learning how to write in cursive, not even learning how to like sign their name on a check, much less what a check even is. I have never even
They will
had
never
to
use a
like
check.
sign a check, but I don't think they even like understand that concept. So it's just like this. I think it's really backwards to eliminate the tangible skills that were needed to engage in certain forms of art just because an iPad can do it for you.
Yeah. I think if I was gonna me being like, if I had this job and I got to do all this, but I feel like if I was part of the marketing team for this advertisement, I feel like it'd be a better message and a better use of resources to show like the ways in which you can incorporate an iPad into these
Yeah.
other things. Like they should exist side by side. And I feel like
Yeah.
teachers are fighting so much to incorporate those things into learning nowadays as well. Like I understand that iPads are helpful. Pretty much every kid I teach uses an iPad. And there are kids that I have taught who didn't have access to a keyboard or a piano, but were practicing like on GarageBand on their iPad for a
Oh,
little bit
wow.
before they got an actual keyboard or piano. And I'm like, it's not like it's not helpful, but at the same time, it cannot in the same
No.
way. It can try its best, but I think technology has its limits,
Hmm.
and the ways that creativity and like original creative tools, they exist for a reason, and I don't think they can really be replaced. So it's upsetting to see that like in this case it's being seen as disposable or obsolete in a way that they're
Absolutely.
not.
And
Definitely
I
not.
think I think it also points to a larger issue amongst kids younger than us that they are solely reliant on this very, I would say, almost one-dimensional device, quite literally, like an iPad is flat. But
Hmm.
I would say like they don't have the computer literacy and technological skills that you would almost expect of them because they were born into an era where they were kind of just handed this device and expected to learn it and know how to use it. But
Mm.
then when you transfer that same knowledge to another device, it isn't always transferable. So I've read testimonials of teachers in middle school and some high schools as well, where kids don't know how to type. They've never been taught. They're just expected to know because they can do it with their fingers, but that's
Mm.
vastly different than typing on a keyboard. And I personally think it would be my nightmare scenario to have to write an essay on an iPad. But kids are
Oh
doing
my
it. And
god.
it's like they don't know anything better because some schools are iPad schools, some schools are Chromebook schools, some schools have the luxury of having Mac desktops or something like that. But that's not the case everywhere. So I think we have to be really careful as a society with, allowing an iPad like device to just be the end all be all for everything. Like
Hmm.
that can't replace genuine interaction with art supplies or with other people.
Yeah, I think kids deserve better than that
I
for sure.
agree. And in general, technology and music has begun to evolve at an insanely fast rate in multiple directions. But one conversation that's really interesting to me is the use of AI in music. AI can feel like a very controversial topic just to begin with, because it is. There are so many concerns for privacy, for copyright, for ownership of AI created works. Like, we don't even have the beginning of the necessary legislation or ethical rules and regulations necessary for this type of technology to exist, but it does exist.
Hmm.
You can replicate someone's entire image onto another person, their voice, their likeness. You can make them look like they're doing something that they're not. Like, there's so many apprehensive, or I guess apprehensible repercussions from this.
Hmm. It's been interesting to see, especially I think most recently I've been seeing a lot of people talking about it in terms of the Drake Kendrick Lamar controversy at the moment, and
That's another big thing.
and the BBL Drizzy song. Did you hear about this?
I have heard about it.
The the BBL Drizzy like what Metro Boomin sampled was AI generated. So
Oh,
people were talking about if like the person who created it, like he is an artist, so technically he owns the song, but the song itself was AI generated, and then Metro Boomin sampled it. And then now there's just all these newer versions that keep being created, fully dogging on Drake. I've heard the term BBL in a song so many times in the past week or two, and it will not let up.
that's
but I
so
think,
funny.
but I think it has been interesting to see like the ways in which that I feel like it started as a joke. Like I remember seeing all these like SpongeBob AI generated songs, or
Yeah,
somebody would write the song fully and then be like, okay, now have Squidward from SpongeBob sing it.
sing it. Yeah.
And now it's like people are hearing songs and they're like, wait, is this an actual Ariana Grande song or is this AI generated? To the point where they have to put the little like tag, like social media posts that are using
Yeah.
AI, but you don't have to. That's the thing. It's a choice whether
Yeah,
or not you
I
want to say it's AI generated.
yeah, that's so true. I wonder if that's going to actually become the norm, like if it's going to become necessary for people using AI to like create a disclaimer similar to how it happened with advertisements on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Um it's also really interesting because it is getting harder to tell. There's a website called suno.com, SUNO, and it was recently brought to my attention by some professors that I had at Frost actually, just discussing like what are the benefits, what are the limitations of this technology, are there limitations, is it just going to keep getting stronger, keep getting more capable? And I know a lot of artists, including myself, a lot of the time have this fear of being replaced by AI, have this fear of our jobs being taken, of good music, quote unquote, becoming obsolete. I do think there will be some form of natural quality control. I do not believe that AI is going to have the power to completely overturn the music industry by itself. I do, however, believe that it can and will be used as a tool by songwriters instead of maybe having a co writing session. Maybe AI is your co writer. Maybe they're the
Mm.
one giving you ideas that now you're taking and revamping or reworking or changing into something else. And I don't think there's necessarily ethical repercussions to that, but it does depend on what the AI is trained on, right? So if the AI is trained on a very specific artist's songs, how much of that is their intellectual property?
Mm-hmm.
If at all, if any. But again, music is so cyclical and there's so much influence between different musicians and their sounds. How can any one person say that they own this sound? They can't.
Right. It's been interesting to see like the ways in which the term intellectual property have been used in this discussion, because I think there was also like a book that was written or like a draft of a book from I think this was at the very beginning of this full like AI music or AI intellectual property conversation, but like
Mm-hmm.
the it was trained on a specific author's type of book, and then
Mm-hmm.
the ideas that it was giving this author were basically straight from several of a particularly well-known like author's books. So it's like at a certain point, are you just rewriting someone else's story?
Yeah.
Like where is the line? And I think that the laws around it are going to slowly start incorporating that. I think that it should, because people's products and people's like really creative fingerprint are the through lines of a lot of this stuff. And I think that if we don't get a handle on it soon, it's going to cause some real issues, especially for the creatives.
Yeah, and I think we saw this same issue come about with how sampling was used in the 80s versus how it's used now. I know sampling was a very popular method in the hip hop community when it was really being developed out of freestyle, when it really started coming into the mainstream. And that wasn't necessarily seen as something predatory or something that you needed to fully give credit for. It was almost seen as redundant to do that because someone hearing your song would know that you sampled XYZ song. Or at least they should. It was seen as a sign of musical intellect if you understood, okay, this song came from the inspiration of this one. But now that we have so much content of digitized music out there, it's impossible to tell where anything is coming from. So without acknowledging that first as the artist sampling a song or getting an inspiration from something else, you are infringing on their copyright and their intellectual property. So it's like this conversation, I think, is going to go the same way that sampling did. At first, it's like, okay, like free game. Anyone can use AI for anything. And then eventually, I think the uses and the allowances are going to become much more specified, especially amongst like the biggest players in different industries. I'm sure that an engineering firm doesn't want their top engineers using AI for formulas. I'm positive of that. Even if they become advanced to a point that maybe they could do it for them, there's still room for error, human or technological. So if you're not fact checking one with the other, it leads to a lot of potential dangers. So I think that it's not something to completely shy away from, but I also think it's something to like develop concrete safeguards against.
Most definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have to go into a quick commercial break before our next segment. Hey guys, welcome back to the Jasmine Ortiz Show. This is our segment on technology in art. We touched upon it a bit in our first segment about AI in music, discussing different elements that have been, either advanced or taken aback. For example, how analog elements in music have been underutilized a lot lately. But there's also elements of controversy with using AI in music because of the ethical repercussions. Jordy, as an artist, like what are your thoughts on utilizing AI as a tool?
Yeah, I think that I don't know how much of a place AI should have in the music industry. And I say that because from what I've seen of what people are using it for in general nowadays, it's like, my mom told me this week that when she's making an itinerary, that using ChatGPT or AI in general has been a helpful tool. And I'm like, if it's something that's adding to your like daily life operations, I feel like that's different. But when it comes to creativity, I think there's only so far that one should be using AI for. I think there's a difference between using it to help you kind of generate ideas, kind of like push you in one direction or not. But then when it comes to it starting to infringe on other people's intellectual property or kind of take away your autonomy in a lot of different ways in creating music. I think that as an artist, we should be careful about how much we're using AI and what we're doing. And also, AI can't do what humans can do. That's just true as of
No,
right now. There's a
I
certain
agree.
human touch that exists in what we do, and music is supposed to breathe, and art is supposed to breathe in a lot of different ways. And I think that you can tell when it just doesn't in the right way.
Yeah. I think, quote, bad music has existed always and it will continue to exist. And like I said before, I think it'll almost be a quality control thing where audiences will eventually catch on to, okay, this artist's songs are clearly being written by AI
Mm-hmm.
or mostly being written by AI. Or even worse, an insult, this sounds like it was written by AI and then it wasn't. Like, that's terrible. I think it can be used to an extent, like you said, helping out with operational elements or even song structure or catching the vibe of a specific genre. I think that could be a way it's used positively as well. But if you literally copy paste like what you're getting on suno.com and put it into Logic and then re-record it with your voice, it's probably not going to sound like a real song, or at least not a really good song. It
Agreed.
might sound like a song in a made for TV movie that was completely fabricated and not released by a real artist. So I think that at least safeguards us a little bit. But beyond that, there's also the conversation of how social media plays a role in all of this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, like you said, the Drake BBL song, like all of that is circulating through social media. And the fact that social media exists means that this type of music already has a platform and an audience, if someone were to take it more seriously than that. You can even see AI avatars that exist on Instagram as like real influence, like the ones that use what is it, Kendall Jenner's likeness and Charlie D'Amelio's likeness.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like separate creators, but they're literally these people's faces. That adds like a whole other layer of fabricating, like basically making up a false identity for someone through this fake AI avatar and then having them create music. That's already happening. There's already artists on Spotify that are sung by real people, probably written by real people, but their artist persona is, digitally generated.
It's an interesting thing to see. It's very creepy also, in a way.
It is.
I remember the first one I was aware of is, what's her name? Lil Miquela? Did you ever hear about
That's what I was trying to talk about. That's what I was talking about. I forgot her name.
Yeah, Lil Miquela. And I'm like, now I need to look this up because I remember.
That is so weird to me.
I remember when she first came out, and they call her, like, her official title is fictional character. Which is very odd because why, like, this fictional character has an Instagram and
brand deals and voiceovers and contracts.
This
and
is
it's
an
like who is behind this person? And then the weirdest thing to me is these are real people's voices, being used in this way. And now we won't even need real people's voices if AI can like purposefully replicate them and do so in a way that's convincing. So these figures will almost become sort of real in a way. And it's crazy because why aren't these opportunities being given to like a real human instead of whatever company or management team or corporation is behind something like Little Miquela? Is it a thought experiment? I can't tell.
All of the above. I don't know. What's crazy is she has 2.6 million followers. I am one of them. And like I remember seeing like all of these very like it feels like a real person even though you know that it's not, or I guess there to a certain extent there are real people behind it or behind her, but it's a really interesting thing. I also think that in the general AI conversation, when it comes to talking about it in the context of art, it's also taking jobs away for a lot
visual
of people.
artists a lot of the time.
Visual artists in particular.
I think more so than musicians, they can be at risk.
To a certain extent, it's cool to see what a computer can do, but also in the same way that I was saying, like music breathes, I think art is supposed to breathe as well. And I think it kind of cheapens it a little bit when there wasn't a like real brain behind it, or it's the amalgamation of so many different types of brains and different artists that a computer has absorbed and then spit something else out at random that's not as deliberate. And I think that in some ways it can be helpful. Like I feel like every platform, every like art or graphic design platform I've seen lately has AI as an option to help optimize things and to help give you new ideas and things like that. But I think when it comes to entirely AI generated art and things like that, I don't know, it's never really sat right with me, and it just doesn't look right. And they can't do hands, which is the weirdest thing.
I can't do hands either, so I understand that one. No, I definitely get what you're saying. I think there are benefits and there are also very real detriments, right? I mean, even this program, Riverside, where I'm recording the podcast, uses AI to automate how we're enhancing audio and as well how to cut down our long form videos into short form content. I love that feature. I think it's very intuitive. And although sometimes it doesn't really understand like what we're trying to talk about in a section, it does hone in on pretty interesting parts of a show. So I think it can be useful in ways like that. But with visual art specifically, I think people might have pushback on it as far as feeling guilty for using AI instead of a visual artist because two reasons. The first one being everything is really expensive. So, of course, visual artists and graphic designers have to charge more for their product. And a lot of times businesses or artists can't or don't want to pay as much as they're probably worth in these professions. That's A. And B, a lot of the time you look at contemporary art made by humans, and it can be really questionable. I'm not going to say I don't love contemporary art because I absolutely do. But especially in Miami, it can sometimes feel like there's this trend of like, I'm an investment banker and I'm just going to be a professional artist also. And I'm going to be an art basel and I'm just going to throw paint at a canvas and it's going to be art. And
Really?
that totally can be art. But I think some people are like done with the ruse and they're like, okay, if this is art, then AI is art. And that's
Okay.
like where the general consensus like mentality is coming from. I don't think it's one or the other, right? I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I think you can absolutely critique like the validity of a human's art, just like you can critique the validity of AI generated art.
Hmm. I think it's definitely been interesting to see. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I like seeing it. It's interesting in general, but it's a little scary. And I'm always like in the back of my head, I'm like, AI equals like robots taking over the earth. I don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot more research needs to be done into the whole concept of it because I know that some research has been started, not necessarily completed or reviewed, but started on measuring originality of AI generated music and art versus human generated music and art.
Hmm.
And so far, it seems like at least if the percentages of originality are somewhat comparable, then there shouldn't be an ethical issue with it, right? Because ultimately, every piece of art and literature is derivative of something. It can be derivative of how you grew up, stories your parents told you as a kid. It could be derivative of music you listen to in passing. It can be derivative even just of your own music and art education. Because ultimately, we do have those influences coming from somewhere. Even if and when we are creating our own unique identity as an artist, visually or sonically, which we do, AI can kind of also do that if you train it on the right influences. So it's such a hard and nuanced conversation because if a human can do it, can't AI also do that? Or can't AI
Hmm.
do that and then a human can utilize it as a tool? So I originally was very much in the school of thought of like AI is bad, AI is scary, AI is terrible. But I'm also like, okay, this is the reality of what's happening. The metaverse exists. I mean, Paris Hilton is literally a DJ in the metaverse, also. She
Hmm.
makes money DJing for people's avatars in the metaverse. That is like the biggest backwards mind screw I've ever heard in my life. If that's happening and that's a lucrative place to be business wise,
Hmm.
who am I to not try to at least engage in it a little bit?
That's also such a weird sentence. Like, imagine
Yeah.
having said that sentence
10 years
in
ago,
10 years ago. Paris Hilton is making money DJing for people's avatars in the metaverse. What does
we
it
would
even
think it's
mean?
like a George Orwell novel.
Right?
And it
I
kind of
didn't look,
is.
but it
It
kind of
kind of is.
is.
1984. Everyone should read it because we're living it, guys. Anyway, not to be weird and a conspiracy theorist. I do genuinely think to like wrap up the conversation, AI can be useful and social media can be useful. They're both tools and I think they can be used as mediums to present art
Mhm.
or to better art, but I don't think they should replace it altogether whatsoever.
Agreed.
All right, guys, moving into a quick commercial break before our next segment. Hey, guys, welcome back. This is my favorite segment of the show, our Uncut Diamond segment, where we interview upcoming musical artists, entrepreneurs, and creatives. Today, we have the one and only incredibly talented Vita Kari, based out of Los Angeles, California. I met Vita 4 years ago during the pandemic when we made some art together in their former Vita Wood Art Studio. I can't wait to ask some questions and share a lot about their art with you. Hey, Vita, welcome.
Hi.
So, I would love you to introduce yourself to our audience, describe a little bit about who are you, where you're from.
Yes, my name's Vita. I'm from Los Angeles and I'm a visual artist. Right now, I'm doing a lot of illusion based visual art. So, when you met me, I was doing like really immersive stuff. I had like the immersive studio. I wanted to transport people into a world. That was what I was super interested in. But I found a limitation in how far I could get with like a physical space, especially because I think COVID really inspired me to go further and how I could interact with people both like online and also like in public spaces. So I was thinking, how can I go further? How can I really push this? So I started going into like digital performance art and then public performance art in the last year or two. And that's what I've been into.
I love it. I was showing Jordy before some of your recent performance art pieces, like what you did at Art Basel in December 2023 when you were stuck in a can. I love that one. That is just so iconic. So can you explain like the inspiration behind that piece and even your most recent performance art of you marrying your digital self?
Yeah, of course. It's been so interesting because there's been so many performance artists that have come before me and inspired so much of these pieces. But I think the biggest difference with what has really pushed these pieces and the inspiration for them is the digital aspect. I mean, so much of what I do is consume online media. I think all of us probably do, but me, I think my screen time is off the charts. Like, if I could just get paid in screen time, like I'd have a house. It'd be crazy. But
Yeah.
like I just consume so much media. So I think about like the interruption of how do I interrupt from the doom scroll? Like I definitely think about that a lot. So I think for me, part of it was like, how can I create an interruption digitally? But then also how can I take it a step further and do an interruption in a public space that's truly like a glitch? And there's a really interesting book called Glitch Feminism, which was written like kind of back in the day, not back in the day, but like over I think 5 years ago, which in like the digital realm feels like a long time ago because some of the terms are dated. But basically this artist talks about how like some work can provide like a glitch in essentially like fabric of the world, like essentially like a glitch in the matrix kind of energy. And I think that that's really interesting. Like,
Yeah.
so with the can, or anytime I'm like trapped in something like a billboard or trapped in a can physically, like I think that those kind of interruptions are similar to like interrupting the doom scroll online. So that's what I've been really leaning into.
That's amazing.
So cool.
I love how you describe that too. Like, and I feel like that's totally what you're doing. Like, I think you're succeeding in it because it's very, I think we're used to very like mindless scrolling a lot of the time, but seeing your stuff immediately kind of snaps me out of it, and I feel like it makes me enjoy it more. So I think you're definitely succeeding.
No, I was just saying thanks. I appreciate it.
How do you think you would describe yourself as an artist, or what do you think your identity is as an artist?
It's such an interesting question, right? Because it's like I've dabbled in music, I've done like community art spaces. I feel like I've had so many chapters, but I guess like new genres is a good word to sum up somebody that experiments in like installation and da 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 da. But I guess like multimedia or just an artist in general. I think overall.
That's awesome. I see you as one of the most artistic people I know, to be honest, because I think you have a vision with everything that you touch. And you mentioned just now that you have made music in the past. Is that something that we can expect maybe moving forward? Any new music projects?
Dang, it's so interesting because like making music for me, I was like, what do I really like about making music? Like when I was thinking about like when I was making music, I really loved the world building of it. I loved performing and I loved making the videos and being able to like create like a moment, but I didn't really like singing that much. Also, I'm a huge computer nerd, so I can't really sing that well. I can just like adjust my vocals so much on the computer, but
Yeah,
I am
yeah.
like not like Jasmine, incredible singer, like
Oh,
incredible,
thank you.
incredible. I admire it so much. I've seen it happen, but like, no, me, I'm just like an editor of vocals. So when I think about like what I really liked from singing, I think I really liked the ability to like create a world around what I was talking about. And then also the performance. I loved the ability to be in a place where people were gathering and then being able to subvert expectations. So even when I was performing music, I would do things like have like what looked like dancers on stage, and then we would like go off stage and like have mirrors inside masks and like take off the masks and like put the
Oh,
mirrors
that
on
is so
people's
cool.
faces. Yeah, it was so fun. And so
I
much of
love
it was
that.
about like performance art, even though I didn't even realize it in that moment. So I think for me, music in the future potentially, but more of it I think for me was like I really loved the subversion.
Yeah. I think I myself and a lot of other artists have a lot to gain and learn from you saying that, because I think sometimes we take our art and our singing element of it so seriously that we forget to add that fun campiness that engages with the audience. So I'm inspired. I'm inspired about like my next live performance, kind of spicing it up a little bit, doing something more, I think, interactive is really cool.
Oh my gosh, you inspire me.
Oh, thank you. So I want to talk about, actually, congratulations, first of all, Master Grad. Super
Yeah.
exciting. So Vita just graduated with a master's in fine art, I believe, from Otis. So you carved your own path in this world of virality as an art form. How did you go about ideating and then executing this concept?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good question. I think it's interesting because in the art space, it's incredibly academic. I didn't really fully understand this until I was really invested in fine art. And I realized I was hitting like a glass ceiling. I was thinking, okay, I really want to be an artist. I want to be in these spaces. And I realized there was a cap to what I could achieve unless I was functioning within an institution. And I don't love that. I'm kind of I was at the point where I was like, if I can't beat them, I'm gonna join them. And I think Otis is a great program too because it really like is a bunch of people that I think are, you know, holding space for the fact that institutional learning is challenging, but we're all kind of gonna make it work. So I think that was one of the first things was realizing that art in itself is a very like academic and institutional practice, and then figuring out what is the cracks that can be filled. How can I like create something that hasn't been I mean everything's kind of been done before, but what two things can be like combined maybe that haven't been done in this way. So I think that's why virality as a form is so interesting, because like internet as a art practice has been seen, but virality as a form is still hard to argue, and I'm still figuring out how to really like properly articulate it. But I think with the support of everyone I met, like I've figured it out slightly. I still have a long way to go, but I really believe in it, and I think it's catching on, and there's a lot of people that are really interested in pursuing that as their own practice. Hopefully one day when people read in the history books, it'll be a thing, you know, because it is such a real participatory art form. And when I think about the fact that people aren't seeing it that way or haven't seen it until like recently, it blows my mind because it's so obvious. But that's just me.
I love how you describe that. I feel like that it's a participatory art form because you're absolutely right. I think that we forget that sometimes in terms of like taking ourselves too serious. But I feel like the way you do it has just been really interesting to see. So like appreciate
Oh
that.
my gosh, of course. Yes, if it's not fun, I like don't want to consume it. You know what I mean? Like if it's not fun, I mean, serious. I love a serious concept, but it has to be through the lens of play, or else I like start to like lose sight of it a little bit.
Yeah. Can I ask you, what is your brainstorming process like then for your content? Like if your goal is having fun and kind of breaking that almost like fourth wall, like how do you start your ideas for those?
Yeah, I think it's great question. I think that the biggest thing to know is there's always a formula with this stuff. The formula is like ever changing as content is, always shifting, but we like love brain candy, right? We love to be there's a way to catch attention, and marketing specialists have done this forever and ever and ever. There's been a way to like capture attention, whether it's bright colors or quick content, or the 3 seconds of the hook is what we're seeing recently, right? And even though the duration of like the video shifts, whether it was like 7 seconds was like last year's thing, now we're doing a little bit of longer form video, right? We're seeing longer form come back, as in like up to 60 seconds. So even though the duration is always shifting, the way to kind of grab attention is always the same and seems like it has been forever. But I think the biggest thing is that I don't think of it really. I just kind of throw it together with all of this in mind and hope it works. And I think also too, when you have like a concept that is based in like high camp, high silly concepts, it is important, to recognize the serious behind it, especially if you're a person that is, for example, if your art or if your music or your paintings have like an element of hyper silly, it's important, and you have something serious to say. It's important to stand your ground with that seriousness because it takes a lot of serious to be that silly. You know what I mean?
Mm.
That is so well put. I think even with art that isn't, trying to achieve that hyper campy or silly narrative, I still think it feels hard to stand your ground sometimes. Fully with your chest say, I'm proud of this, or this is what I'm presenting to the world. I think with any art, you have to be the most confident in it, and that's something that I struggle with a lot, even with my own music and videos, up until honestly more recently with my most recent project. I think before that, there was almost a sheepishness when I was sharing music with people for no good reason. And I think, you don't see that with lawyers or doctors. You don't see that with other professions where they have quote unquote a tangible skill set, but we also have tangible skill sets. And I think it's so important to, you know, emphasize that you should have that all encompassing belief in yourself when you're creating your art. I love that.
I think some of it's gendered too, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I agree with that too. I think when they see a young woman, doing this career in music, being a pop star, so to speak, it's something to look down on. It's something that isn't taken seriously until they're forced to take it seriously.
100%.
So I wanted to also ask you, how did it feel when your first few videos went viral on TikTok? I know you've had other viral successes in the past, but specifically the craziest thing about being creative series.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I've had other viral videos in the past, and I've definitely experimented with what that could look like. But the virality of those was, I mean, like just next level, like type of viewership. But I think the interesting thing about it is like if you just turn off your phone, it kind of goes away. You know what I mean? And so the interesting thing about going viral is like if you turn off your phone, it goes away. But then you go into the world and like, somebody at the coffee shop will be like, "Are you the person?" And it's like, "Yes, that is me. That's me." And so it's interesting. It's great. It can be, people either go one of two ways. I think if they see me in person, they're like, "I love your art," or "Are you the craziest thing person?" And I like either. I like either one. The other day somebody said, "You look like this TikToker I follow," which I really liked too, because I was like, wow, it's like the simulacra experience to be so lost in in it that it's like not even me. It's like it could be only I look like this person. And I like that. I think that's the biggest shift though, is like it really only exists in the phone, and then you put it down and it's gone until it infects the real life. So I think also too something
That's
about
true.
it. Yeah, that's one of the most interesting things. And I think also too then there's the sense of like when the idea gets replicated so many times, you like it like no longer has you in it. Then it's other people like doing the trend or doing the quote, or just it like loses yourself a little bit. I also like that too, because when people make it their own, it's like, dang, you took it further than I ever could. So I mean, it's been awesome. It's been so interesting. I mean, it is such a unique experience that no notes. It's journey. I'm here for it.
It's amazing. Can I ask you, where do you find inspiration from? Like either people in your life or like other artists that you look to find inspo?
So in school I've been given like a lot of text to read, which I like did not like. I don't like read. I'm dyslexic. I hate reading, but I do read now. And so I think reading from like the greats of the like original performance people and like kind of what their ideas were, and then the criticisms of them has been really helpful. Like there was this one like performance artist that everyone, or video artist that everyone was like obsessed with, this guy back in the day. His name was Vito Acconci, and he like did this piece where he like looked at the like lens, and he like, it was like so deep. And then this other artist, just like, who was like this gay woman, was like, "This is the most pretentious thing I've ever seen, and I'm gonna write that like line by line why." Her name was like Rosalind Krauss, and she was just like, "X, Y, and Z, this is why." And there's like a lot of gossip and tea in these like old like 70s and 80s texts. I'm like, ooh. So I've been like actually honestly like reading a lot of these from like this different lens. It is academic, but not as much as I thought. It's very like, and then this is why this sucks, and this is why I'm right. So I kind of like that energy. There's so much like, I think the way people just proclaim that they are correct and they know what they're talking about is something I feel inspired by. Kind of back to what we're talking about, like just the way that people are willing to claim that they know what they're talking about is something I want to do more of, because we should all be doing that. So that's something I'm inspired by right now, is people that just took up that space and said, "This is mine to take." I really love that. And I think something else I'm inspired by is, I mean, I'm constantly around artists in my life, like all the time. Like my partner, my friends, my sister is an incredible musician. So I walk outside and I like throw a like a stone at the closest person I see, and it's a creative person like giving me feedback. So I'm really lucky.
I love that. And I think it's so important. It speaks to the necessity of having a community as an artist. And although the creation of art can sometimes be a solitary process, it can sometimes be you locking yourself in your room and just finishing a song, it can also be the exact opposite. And I think that's where I personally thrive the most, when I'm in a collaborative space, either with one other producer, another writer, or both, and really feeding off of that positive energy and feedback. Because ultimately, when you have that kind of dynamic and you have other people who are trying to think outside of the box in their own way, it's only going to elevate the art that you're able to create.
1000%.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. I also want to ask you, what do you feel is your greatest skill set? Because that's something that a lot of artists have multiple of.
Wow, my greatest skill set. That is a good question. I think one of my greatest skill sets is to finish a project. I think that's something that it took a long time for me to be able to do because I just have ADHD. First of all, I am late everywhere. I am almost an hour late to 20 to an hour, 20 minutes to an hour late. And that is what I'm working on right now. Like I literally before this was watching a TikTok,
Same.
like how to be on time. Yeah, it is something that's so hard. So like and before that, like a couple years ago, the biggest thing I was like my other like really big thing I had to get over was how to finish something I want to do. Like, is it like you have to write down the goals? Is it you have to like make manageable goals with like a thing? And so I like really studied that and now I can do that. So I think like right now I would say I'm really proud of that skill set because I didn't used to have it. Hopefully next time we
Yeah.
talk, it'll be that I'm not late anymore because that is what I'm working on right now. But I would say right now it's the fact that I can finish a project. Like I can really say like I'm going to do this and then it gets done because I didn't used to be that guy.
Wow. It's amazing that you say that because that's what I'm working on right now. I also have ADHD and I was diagnosed like a year and a half ago. So I literally struggle with those two things that you just said
Yeah.
so immensely. And it inspires me to see that you've overcome that challenge, because a lot of my life has been spent in frustration with like, wow, I have this amazing idea. I didn't finish executing. Oh, I have this another amazing idea. I didn't finish executing. So it's awesome. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so happy to hear you say that.
Oh, it's hard. It's
That's
so
amazing.
hard. It's so hard. Also, yeah, I learned that the being late is like has a word time blindness, which feels like I mean my parents would
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
have told them that because they just think like it's an excuse, but they're late too, you know? So it's genetic.
I totally feel you. Let's move into a quick commercial break before our next segment. Hey guys, welcome back. We're in our next segment on the Jasmine Ortiz Show. We have our wonderful guest, Vita Kari, here with us, and my co-host, Jordy Polycarp. So, Vita, our theme and topic this week, inspired by you, has been technology in art. Jordy and I spent a little bit earlier to discuss AI and its use in music. How have you seen that begin to impact the visual art world, and do you have any takes on it?
Yeah, oh my gosh, that is such a great topic. First of all, I see people that I personally know their art gets ripped in AI all the time because AI, right, has to literally pull from all the data on the internet to continue growing. And eventually it'll start pulling from itself and making new data from the data that it's pulled. So it's just like a weird,
Interesting.
building on itself. And it is a incredibly shady practice sometimes, and sometimes tech companies have to do that to be innovative, right? So I definitely
Mm-hmm.
see it happening, but I've also seen some really interesting innovation with it. Like I've seen artists really utilize it in innovative ways that have been really interesting and non-problematic. Like artists that have been
Yeah.
having their stuff ripped have kind of been utilizing it for their own gain. And I don't know, it's an interesting roller coaster. I'm excited to see where it goes. And I am just kind of sitting back and watching it unfold, I feel like.
Yeah.
How have you seen other artists using it? Because we were talking a lot about how we talked about like the Drake Kendrick controversy and BBL Drizzy and like how that started as AI, but also like using it as a tool to songwrite and things like that. But what does that look like in the visual artist community lately?
Yeah, I mean, visual artists, of course, have been using DALL-E as a source for drafting storyboards and concept sketching for a while. And there's kind of two sides of it. I think fine art and visual artists are very anti-AI, but animators, illustrators, designers, anybody that uses Photoshop and the illustration, like the Photoshop fill option, are kind of embracing it. So like it's a little bit of both, right? Because it's, while in the fine art world it can be kind of seen as you lose the hand of the artist, right? And that's a very negative thing, like to lose the very thing that makes the work valuable or tangible. Like this is the thing that the art market is based on, is the ability of the unique production. But in the terms of the design world, I mean, this is something that makes everyone more efficient. So it's in some ways a productivity tool. So I guess it just depends on what
Yeah.
side of the creative world you're in. I think in the fine art world, as tempting as it has been for me to just get on Dolly and like draft some ideas, I really try not to use it. In fact, I like don't use it at all. Like I make tapestries and I do everything on my iPad, and sometimes I'm like, I could just use Dolly, but I'm like, no, I have to draw it. Okay. And that's just because I guess of the self-imposed like feeling and like overall energy in the fine art world that I'm currently feeling. And maybe I'm projecting, and that's just my opinion, because maybe that's actually not it at all, but that's just what I'm seeing. And then in the design world, though, it seems like people are really embracing it. Like generative fill on Photoshop, incredible tool for photographers.
I see both sides of what you're saying, because my roommate works in advertising, and she is friends with a lot of graphic designers, and they actually kind of feel a little bit the opposite. Like sometimes they do like the fact that it's a productivity tool and that it helps them, but a lot of the time there's this underlying fear that, why would a company pay me when they can just use this tool, or pay someone who's less skilled to use this tool? So I think the same feeling has started coming up in music, and Jordy and I were discussing this, where I'm trying to start embracing AI and like overcoming my fear of it by using it as a brainstorming tool, similar to how you would use like a word bank or a random word generator as a tool. But I think there is something to be said about the quality control that I think will happen regardless whether or not AI becomes more popular in a professional sense, because I still think there's nothing like a human touch on a piece of art. It can't be replicated.
I mean, it's interesting because when painters, right, were so, like back in the day, painters were so important to, like, that's how image creation was done. And then when photography came out, painters were like, that's it, we're done, our jobs are done, we should all just unalive ourselves, like it's over. But like then there's still a huge market for us. Photography didn't replace us, it's just something totally different. And they were able to utilize, now most painters use photography as kind of, in a way, their tool to reference an image for paintings. And I feel like I really love thinking about that, because maybe in some ways it feels overwhelming, like we're going to be replaced or our jobs are going to be taken, but maybe instead it'll be a tool, right? Like kind of what you're saying, that we all utilize, like without even realizing it, I love
Yeah.
ChatGPT though. I use it to text my dad. I'm just gonna be honest. Like I literally, me and my dad, like how dads can be. Sometimes they can say something that's totally inappropriate. I completely used it to like generate a text to be like, "This is why it hurt me." He apologized. So ChatGPT got my dad to apologize. That's a big deal. I mean, he's great though. Shout out. But
Go ChatGPT.
we love Chatty.
I'm so behind on that. Like, I just literally recently started investigating using ChatGPT. Like, I had friends who were using it 2 years ago, and I'm just here like, maybe I'll type it into my browser. Like, that's the limit of where I'm at right now. But I do want to start to embrace it, because I think fear of new things, fear of evolution of technology only leads to someone being behind. And the last thing I want to feel in this career path where you're already fighting against an inundation of oversaturation is to feel behind on the technology. So I think it's important for all artists listening to this to have an open mind when it comes to using tech in art. Because even as you were talking about, Vita, with social media and virality as a form, I think that's a new concept that a lot of people might have been afraid of in the past.
Absolutely.
I think with me, TikTok especially sometimes has this like double-edged sword feeling to it, because there's a lot of potential for growth and exposure with social media and music. But on the flip side of that, there's also a lot of, so to speak, lower quality music being created solely for TikTok marketing. And that can feel kind of like a push and pull and give and take of what we can be doing with the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And like similarly, you know, sometimes in the arts, I think that there's just like a lot of anxiety, even with social media. Like, but the truth is, we've, you know, democratized like the ability to share, right? And so many great things have happened with it. And even with the idea of like virality, which is, it's received a lot of pushback, but it's also received a lot of positivity. Virality has formed. So I think anybody who's interested in exploring a new medium and like putting their whole, you know, I don't know if I can curse on this, so I won't. But the whole like word in it,
Yeah.
I support it.
I think I really liked, Vita, how you mentioned in terms of like painters being terrified when photography became a thing. And I never really realized how much, I guess, like every new innovation of technology in the arts will cause that kind of anxiety. And so I think, like, just to your point, like kind of embracing it in a way that there are good things about it. And I think it is totally allowing people to maybe get into art in ways that they wouldn't have before. And just making it more accessible to people. But I hope that at least we can find ways to do it that won't kind of detract from art or like take jobs away from other people, because I think for artists, like independent artists in particular, trying to find like cover art and things like that, we were talking about that earlier, is it kind of taking away from the people who would normally be creating this art, or at the same time is it also allowing artists to branch out a little bit and to have fun exploring what they can do and like being multifaceted in that kind of way with their music as well. But it's been interesting to see.
It's interesting though, because I feel like sometimes AI kind of has like a look, you know what I mean? Like it has like
Mm-hmm.
an AI
Yeah.
look. And so if I see somebody who has like like it uses an image that's generated from AI for like their like cover or something, I'm kind of like, you know, and not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
kind of, it's giving like low brow choice, like unless you do it well, unless
Yeah.
you did a good job, in which case like you should be making your cover anyway because you're an artist then at that point, right? But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when somebody has like the hands that don't look quite right or like the face is kind of weirdly generated, I'm like, okay, you didn't do a good job with your AI disguising. I want to see better from you, like, and in which
Yeah.
case
It
the whole thing applies.
it particularly pisses me off when I see like, higher profile musicians do it, because I think it was a whole thing where or this might be speculation, but allegedly when one of the other rap beefs from this year between Nicki and Megan, I think it was that the Bigfoot one, the artwork for that, everyone was saying looked AI generated. And everyone was kind of like, Nikki, like you were somebody who has the resources to actually make this really cool and interesting, and to like hire somebody to make this. Something about it had kind of an AI quality, which is interesting that even like I'm glad that consumers are picking up on it, and art and like artists as well, that like it has a little something about it that's almost like artistic uncanny valley, like it just looks a little off.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
uncanny, I think that's so, I think, okay, so this is just, again, me, my opinion. This is just me. But I think there's something so fun when somebody does use AI and then the whole internet comes after them because of the uncanny effect. Like it's like, okay, we spot it and now we're gonna come after. What is it? And people are like zooming in to like the shoulder and it's like the pattern isn't lining up. Like everyone is now analyzing like where this artist chose to use AI in their cover or whatever. I think
Yeah.
there's a solidarity there. So really it's community building. And so the choice to utilize AI in a time when it's maybe not the move, or maybe it's kind of under scrutiny, is maybe it's a marketing choice. Maybe actually kudos to them because everyone's now talking about did they use AI? And we're actually just on the consumer side. So shout out because like should we all be using AI actually so people can try to spot it? Like is this a marketing choice? Like I have so many questions now. but I get it because it also makes me uncomfortable and like that I don't like that. But now I'm gonna go through and spend the time to zoom in and find where I think it's uncanny valley and send it to all my friends. Like this is a great marketing scheme.
Agreed.
Absolutely. I think the same thing kind of happened. It's not AI related at all, but when the Madison Beer song went like mega viral on TikTok, "Make You Mine," and then everyone was like, "What's the trend? What's the trend?" Like no one could figure it out. And I kind of think that was just a brilliant marketing move. Somehow, somewhere along the way, someone created a trend that wasn't a trend, so then everyone who was making these response videos was just genuinely confused. And so much content came from that song because no one could find the source. And it's almost the same thing like what you're saying. And I don't know, I also never thought about it that way. Like how painters must have felt when photography came out is also probably how sound engineers felt when Logic came out
Oh yeah.
or GarageBand. I genuinely like from my, you know, 2024 perspective have always thought of production through the realm of a digital audio workspace, but that was not the norm even 30 years ago. So, how did those people adapt and feel? And I feel like it ultimately wasn't really a problem because there are people who still use those mixing boards, but those engineers just went digital.
I mean, you even see a return to people using samples from like real instruments right now and like things like that, right? Because people are
Yeah.
trying to distance themselves from using like the loops that everyone has access to. Like you're seeing that like
Mhm.
and like shout out Splice. We love Splice. Like I love Splice. But people I think sometimes are trying to differentiate themselves. So we're seeing
Yeah.
bands kind of have another renaissance. We're seeing instruments come back. And I think similarly, we're probably gonna see that in visual arts. We're gonna see people stop making so many like, and graphic designers have had such like a moment for so long, like dominated the insta feeds and like whatever, but like I think we're definitely going to see a shift probably towards analog work again. Like we're already kind of seeing this in the fine art world. We're seeing textiles really having a moment right now. Like we're seeing painters are dominating the market again, and I think that a big reason is just because yeah, people want, you know, representational, and they want, you know, things that can't be generated. So for example, like the pendulum art always swings like abstract and then representational, and you know, representational as in like it looks like a figure, it looks like something you can spot out. And so I think right now we're
Yeah.
really in a representational moment. People really want paintings and people really want like textiles, and specifically people really want work that has to do with like ethnic identity and really personal like identity based work, like queer identity. People are really interested in that. And I think it's because you know, collectors as well as like artists are really interested in making work that has to do with the self. And I would say that's definitely a pushback from digital integration, which, you know, we see, which is why any artists that are working at the forefront of art, you know, and technology are kind of going through an interesting space, which is why I think performance art is so interesting and important right now. Because it's kind of like we can't ignore the fact that we're in such like a digital boom, right? Like, but I think it's you know, a little bit of both. But it is definitely scary too, because I know there's a list that came out of all the artists that whose stuff had been ripped for AI, and like multiple people I knew had their names on the list. So I think there's also going to be a huge lawsuit in which people are going to get like funded. Like they're just going to get a check probably.
Yeah.
So that's also kind of nice.
I think so. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, art, fashion, culture, all of it's on a pendulum swing. So you look at music and you know, like you said, this band renaissance is coming back, live music sounds, genuine instrumentation, all of that's coming back. So I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to see it, and I'm happy to hear that painting has kind of made this huge comeback in the art world, because I think those are mediums that we can't lose sight of. We can't allow the technological revolution in this day and age to completely overtake like the tangible skill sets that people have spent their entire lives curating.
For sure. And I think that's why even too with the like Virality as Form project, like that's I think why that project is even so interesting in a time when we're so like oversaturated with tech stuff, NFTs, and like it's just like if somebody mentions an NFT to me, I just want to punch them in the face and throw up. Like I just like that's just because it's been so oversaturated, like AI and this and that. And I think when we think of like digital performance art, that adds like a tactile, you know, conception again, that adds the participation again, that adds like the human connection that again we're lacking. And especially online, how do we really conceptualize that. And performance art has like a long history of being something that has participation with an audience, like true participation. So whether it's like Trapped in a Can that like was real, like out there in Miami, and like people are like throwing cans or pouring water on me, versus like the digital project where it's literally like interrupting the feed and people have to like guess what it is that's the interruption, that like provides a more community and tactile like touch in a digital integration, which I think is why it's important. But it's hard to look at like the AI and the AI projects coming out and like even the deep fakes and stuff, and to feel like, how can we make this a visual art project? Like, how can we utilize this? It feels devoid of human touch. So that's something I'm trying to navigate too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was so well said and super nuanced. I love hearing you talk about this stuff. I could talk about it with you for hours and hours. But we do have to move into a quick commercial break. I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. I enjoyed this conversation tenfold. So thank you, Vida.
Yeah,
Can
thank
you
you for
share with
sharing.
us how we can find you on social media?
Yeah, of course. My name is Vida Kari, and so all of my ats are just at Vida Kari, VITAKARI.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see you after the break.
Thank you.
Hey guys, welcome back to our last segment. This is our community corner where we answer your questions on stories you tell us or things you want advice on. So I have a question here today. Is a long distance relationship worth it?
Oof.
That is definitely, that's a question Jordy and I probably have slightly different takes on. I have had this knack for some reason, just doing that to myself multiple times. I would say it's worth it with the right person, but you have to know what you're getting yourself into, because if you've never met this person, if it's like an online thing, if it's someone you have very little experience or knowledge with, you meet them on vacation and you're like, oh my God, this is the love of my life, maybe stay in touch as like pen pals. But if you don't, have like tangible in-person connection with them, at least for a period of time, it can be incredibly difficult to try and start a relationship that way.
I agree. I think I think it depends on the person. For me, and like my friends have seen me go through this kind of figuring out if that was something I wanted for myself. And I think that when it comes to long distance, it depends on if you think you're in the right place for it, if they're in the right place for it, if you know how to communicate properly and openly and honestly, and if you know how to schedule your time. And I think for me, at the time when I was trying to figure out if I wanted to be in a long distance relationship or not, I didn't have those things. Like, I think I knew how to communicate openly, but not finding time to do that. And I think it really can like take a hit on the relationship, depending on the person. I think there's no right answer I don't think it's a one size fits all, but I think if you're the kind of person who knows, like, you need physical closeness in order to feel like you have a connection, and where like that kind of like online distance just doesn't really feed your soul the way that you need it to, then don't do it. But that's just for me.
Yeah. I will say I am one of those people, and I've done it a lot recently, but I will also say having an end date in mind is really important. Like, knowing or planning for a future where you won't be in separate places anymore, I think is a make it or break it.
Mm-hmm. That's what I've heard always, also. Like,
Yeah.
like in real life and also from like TV shows and things like that, like having an end date. And I always said I would do it if I knew there was an end in sight. And it was like 6 months or less for me. But that might just be like I've never really done it kind of thing. So I think it depends. Yeah, absolutely. I got a question as well about kind of on the like school, college topic. Is grad school worth it as an artist?
Crickets.
Same.
Well, let's talk about the fact that neither of us did that.
Some people do.
It depends on what kind of art, though, because Vita was just on with us and they did a master's program for visual fine arts. I mean, that absolutely makes sense for what they're doing and their trajectory, because ultimately in the visual arts world, like they said, sometimes you need an institution to back you. In performing arts, if you're doing classical or jazz or composition or arrangement or film scoring, all of those professions absolutely have a benefit from going to a grad program in those disciplines. As a performing artist in contemporary, like Jordy and I think both of us can kind of agree that we felt like we had gained what there was to gain from our undergrad experience, and moving into a master's program would only kind of be delaying the work that we needed to start doing, like on a ground level as artists.
Yeah. I think delay is a good word, because I think especially for us, like being a performing artist, they start younger and younger and younger, right? So for us, like age is a whole separate thing that's like a little scary about like trying to figure out when is the right time to like full send into this kind of career. But I think like from what I always heard from our Frost professors in the contemporary program, every single one of them where this conversation was brought up said, do not do it. Every single one of them, even if it wasn't even on the performance side, even if from like the music business perspective, the number of professors who I had who were like, if you really dedicate yourself, you could get hired now, like as a sophomore in college at a record label. And so they were kind of like, it doesn't really, they were like, if you're like a go-getter, if you are tenacious and like care about the industry and want to learn and put your whole self into it, you do not need grad school, because they would rather you have like on the ground real experience, like hands-on experience doing like the kinds of things that like these like industry execs and like A&R assistants and things like that are already doing, as opposed to like learning it hypothetically on your own for like an additional 4 years. I if anything, I think it might actually be a detriment.
I think the other thing that you just said hit the nail on the head. Like, you can't learn this kind of thing in theory. It is absolutely something that you have to just learn through trial and error and experience. And any business looking to scout you as an artist or looking to hire you as an assistant or a business executive is going to want and prefer that you have that actual life experience or business experience than additional schooling that is not always applicable.
Absolutely. But do what's right for you. It's gonna depend.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, if you need an additional, like, gestation period, that also can work as that. But it's not, I think, a tool to, like, leverage you out into the music world and you're, going to get a leg up because of it, because most artists don't even have a bachelor's degree.
Right. Don't do it.
So
even
if you're already, like, you're already going above and beyond doing that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But I think at least, like, for some people as well, like we're privileged in a way to have even been able to go to music school, or to major in what we did at like a traditional institution. And so I think if you're the kind of person who didn't do music or like kind of dipped a toe into the music industry in undergrad, if you want that like real like getting your foundational education in it, if you didn't really get it before, then yes, grad school might be a good idea, just so you can at the same time like try to find internships, try to find jobs, because they really want like hands-on work. But I do think if you're the kind of person who just didn't really get that experience the first time, going back for round 2 to really like fully immerse yourself, I think is always a good idea too.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you guys so much for listening. That was the Jasmine Ortiz Show. We're so excited to be here with you all. Once again, this is with my wonderful co-host, Jordy Polycarp, and we'll be here again for you next week. Thank you.